Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Ferpa Training. First off, your question is probably, what is FERPA? FERPA stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Others also call it the Buckley Amendment. So what does this say necessarily? This applies to all educational agencies, and it applies to institutions. So, for example, public schools and post-secondary schools that are receiving funding. FERPA is a law put in place to protect the rights of students. So, who is granted the rights under the FERPA? It is the parents on behalf of their children, and then students that are 18 years old or in post-secondary school have their rights transferred to them from their parents. And then they also put on their parents who claim children on their tax dependents. So, such as foster parents, adoptive parents, etc. So here's some more facts. So we say PII, which is personally identifiable information. That is protected under the FERPA laws. So, who are people that have access to these? They would be school officials. Well, school officials is very broad, so I wanted to give some examples of what school officials would or that need to be informed of FERPA and who need to comply with this law and make sure they're not breaking any personally identifiable information. So, school officials would be a teacher, a counselor, an admissions officer, an attorney, an accountant, human resource professional, information specialist, and support or clerical personnel. So, a secretary, treasurer, all of those personnel that work inside of our school. So, diving in, let's dive into some more information. Laws that involve the privacies of educational records. We have many laws in the education world, but these are the laws that are that are focused on the privacy of our education. So the first one we've already talked about was the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which I'm going to refer to as FERPA, and it was put in place in 1974. The second one is the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendments, which was put in place in 1978. Then another one is the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, which was actually put in place in 2002. And then the U.S. Patriot Act of 1974 and the Campus Sex Crimes Prevention Act as well. So, here are some facts. FERPA is set in place to prevent schools from sharing student data without parental consent. Um, that is, schools are not able to share it with anyone else unless a parent signs off on it. So, for example, if a student is transferring, a school cannot share it with another school without consent of a parent. So one area that we're working on is how do we protect student privacy, but also balancing the school security. So here are some examples of things that are included in the FERPA laws. So they would be things such as student transcripts, any education records, so SAT scores, ACT data, medical records, any demographical records, disciplinary records, student progress reports, attendance reports, grade point average, academic or testing or physical testing. Those are all categories that fall into the student education record. Therefore, it's not able to be transferred, and that falls under the FERPA. So we have to be careful when we're handling any of that information. Things that are excluded from that law would be teacher private records. So if a teacher is in class taking notes, personal notes over student performance, that's not on their official record. That is not included. Law enforcement records created solely for law enforcement. So if it's for safety reasons, not educational role, that is not included. Employment records, not included. Alumni records are not included. Grades on peer graded papers before they are recorded are also not included. So, schools should always be thinking, why are we holding this information? How long should we hold it? And who are we allowing to have access to it? When we're using vendors, outside vendors, we want to make sure that they're FERPA compliant. So if you're using websites, apps, any type of software, you want to make sure that they are FERPA compliant. So chances are that if they are an app or a website that it's free, it's not FERPA compliant, and they are using education records to sell to third parties, which we're not even aware of as education teachers. I feel like a lot of times we're based on a budget, so we are using things that are free in our classroom. However, we need to all double check and make sure that they're not violating the FERPA laws and that they're in compliance, because if not, they're sharing the education records to third parties. Something that is being used, something that is touchy is if a camera is violating the FERPA, or surveillance cameras are violating FERPA laws. Surveillance recordings that are created and maintained by a school's law enforcement unit are not educational records and therefore not confidential. If, however, those recordings are provided to and then maintained by the school, they become educational records. So, it's a lot of information, but I'm wrapping it up real quick here. So basically, we need to triple check that what we are sharing and make sure we are being FERPA compliant. So, depending on the type of data involved and the context in which the data are being used, there may be a number of specific requirements with which educational agencies and institutions must comply. So, what's next? What do we do? Here are 8 steps in order for us to be FERPA compliant. Raise FERPA awareness. Make sure that your students know that faculty know what's FERPA compliant and what's not. Any type of records. Lock your computer screens when you walk out of the room if it has any student information on it. Make sure that your files are locked away. Anything that you have to get rid of, you make sure you throw away, but not, or that you shred, not just throw away. I'm sorry, and make sure that we are processing the information the correct way. Confirm that FERPA applies to you. Make sure that you are in the position of using it. Know the rights, protections, and expectations. Dig a little further into research. There are so many articles out there. Make sure that you know what your right is, who it protects, and what you're expected in the educational role. Choose compliant vendors. Check your vendors. Make sure that they have a FERPA policy in place. Train all of the in-school employees. That's what we're here doing now. Anyone that's under you, make sure that they also are having the training as well. Implement compliant policies and procedures. Make sure that we have a section in our handbook over this. Make sure that students are aware of it, parents are aware of it, and faculty. Encrypt files and emails. Make sure we use a secure email site. If you are emailing someone outside of our site, you want to make sure that you send it in a secure form with a password so that you are able to, that you are not violating any FERPA or PII laws. Implement any other preventative tools. We'll open it up for some discussion and talk about some other preventative tools that we can put in place. So, as that is, FERPA is something that is a fine line, and I want to make sure that we are protecting our students to the best of our ability. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to ask.